But, Braver Angels is a citizen initiative bringing conservatives and liberals together to counteract political polarization and restore the fraying social fabric in American society. Basically, he brings, people who feel very differently about things to come together, gets them to meet each other, know each other, learn from each other, and not necessarily to agree, but just to be respectful of each other. And Bill's going to talk so much about this, but I have done several of his trainings. We have brought him to all the counties as well. He does a lot of trainings for counties because we are a nonpartisan group of people. So we are very affected by the partisanship that's going on in the country because we are affected by the resources we get, and where if they don't function well, the state and federal government, we don't function. So we are very concerned about this polarization. So we're so grateful that Bill's doing work about that. But I just want to tell you, he's a professor in the Department of Family Social Services at the University of Minnesota, where he directs the Minnesota Couples on the Brink Project and the Citizen Professional Center. So he has really been focusing on relational ethics in the everyday lives of clients and on political stress in relationships. Wow. Anyway, we are so lucky. I'm honored to call him my friend, and actually I call him my neighbor because he lives the floor down from me in my condo. So we're very good friends. And I love him and his wife, Leah. We don't get together as often as we want to, even though we live so close together. But anyway, we both live in Roseville here, and I'm just so grateful, Bill, that you're taking time out now to talk to us. So
okay, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay. All right, thank you, Mary Jo, thank you, everybody. It's that was amazingly short.
Amazingly short
for her. Yeah, that's right. So I was worried that we would just move to Q&A after the introduction. And then she gave the speech about Braver Angels. So no, thank you for that, and it's lovely to be here. I'm afraid the expectations are a little too high. People said great about 3 times during the thing. I prefer to sneak up on people. I prefer, we had a great speaker who unfortunately got sick. And so at the last minute, we brought in Bill. And so give him, and then if it's better than average, then everybody's happy. The other disadvantage, I have to get my disadvantages out. First is too high expectations. The second is, I'm a local. I live a couple miles from here, and everybody knows nobody's an expert within 2 miles of where they live. So it would have been better had you picked me up at the airport and brought me in. And Bill just came in from the airport, and then people think you have something. This is my second time here, and I just always feel this positive energy in this group and in this room. And the country needs this. Desperately needs. Looking through the creed, because we're in trouble. We're in a lot of trouble right now. I used to say, what maybe we need, not that we need, but what could bring us together as a country? Hey, an epidemic. How did that work out? And then when I realized that wasn't going to work out, I thought, do I have to give up my other kind of, last ditch, what could bring us together? Extraterrestrials coming down? No. We would find out whether they're red or blue extraterrestrials, and we would just split. So I want to talk about polarization, engage you in some conversation about it, tell you what this organization, Braver Angels, is doing, and also leave you with a few skills, a few strategies for communicating across divides. If you're in an extended family, you're in the last bastion of political diversity left, okay? Because we can choose our friends based on politics. A lot of work environments are similar, but you don't have any say over who your siblings marry, and who marries them. So everybody is dealing with this in some way, and Thanksgiving is coming up soon. And Americans, after the 2016 election, it got together somewhat less for Thanksgiving that year and spent less time. So that's an illustration of what happens. So what do I mean by polarization? Political scientists and historians are saying that we are more polarized now than we've been at any time since the 1850s. And it's not so much what they call issues polarization. So it's not that say in Congress we have extreme left, extreme right in terms of we don't have many Marxists, we don't have many, policy-wise, there's very few people saying we should eliminate the social safety net, for example. But it's what they're calling affective or social polarization, and that is, it's about how we feel about each other when we disagree. And there's three categories of polarization that academics have talked about, three elements of it. One is othering, and that is that people who vote different than I do, and that's a lot, if you voted in the last presidential election, that means more than 70 million people voted the other way, okay? And what the othering is, I don't get them, I don't understand them. Who are these people? Who are these people? When I was growing up in another era, people mostly got who the other party were. They were your neighbors, but now don't understand them. And the second is not liking them. Okay, so not liking or trusting. So I don't understand them, and I don't like them. Okay, they're not trustworthy people because they differ from me politically and they vote for a different person. And then the third one is that they're morally compromised. They want the worst for the country. And what that often comes down to is if I believe in a policy is good for the country and you disagree with me on the policy, then I think you want bad outcomes. If we disagree on education, for example, then I think you don't care about children's education. As opposed to we both care about children's education and we have different ideas about how to improve it. We've sort of lost the ability to say we want the same stuff, but we disagree about how to get there. Now what happens is, if we disagree on how to get there, I assume you don't want the same goal that I do. If we disagree on health care, you don't want people to have good health care. And so we've this antagonism that has sprung up is what is characterizing this modern polarization. So the political scientists say this has been increasing dramatically in the last 35 years or so. Now, we've always had differences, but this othering, dislike, and the assigning of bad moral motives has been increasing for 35 years. A little illustration from some poll data about this. In 1960, 5% of Americans said they would be uncomfortable with their son or daughter marrying somebody of the other political party. Just 5%. Now, it's 40 to 45%. People say they would be uncomfortable with an inter-party marriage. Attitudes towards interracial marriage have gone the other way. Much more acceptance of interracial marriage. So it's not that we're less tolerant in general, but we become less tolerant of people who differ from us politically. So isn't that something? So that's why this really gets personal. So I want to have a little conversation with you now. I want to kind of brainstorm with you what some of the sources of this polarization, this increase in the polarization are. What are some of the sources? What are some factors in our society that have led to this increase? And by the way, it's happening around the world. Think Brexit, good old stable England. Okay? There are political parties in the western provinces of Canada who want to break off from the rest of Canada. Look what's happening in France and Germany. It isn't just here. And by the way, it's not since it's not since 2016, or it's through multiple administrations. So when you're thinking about sources, don't contribute to the polarization by just blaming the other side. Okay? Because this is bigger than any particular political party. It's bigger than any individual politician. So the question is, what are some of the factors that have led in the last 35 years or so to this big increase in political polarization. So I'd like you to take 30 seconds to come up with some ideas. Factors that have led to this increase in polarization. So a few minutes of reflection. Okay, who would like to call one out? Go for it.
So I think what's happened in the last 35 years is that people have found that fear-based rhetoric is very powerful.
Mm-hmm.
So if you do something rather than being cooperative, if you create a fear in people, that you get a lot more power.
So a lot more fear-based. Yes, I got it. In the back, yes. Go for it. In the back, yeah.
Loss of trust in the government.
Loss of trust in the government, yes. In fact, in the last 40 years, even more since the 70s, there's been a major decline in social trust, in trust of all institutions and of one another. So that's a, let me just stay with that for a moment. Hands down. I'm giving the speech part. And then I'll ask for hands. You understand? Because I get nervous when their hands are up because it looks like you're impatient. So settle down. Okay. Where was I before I insulted the whole group here? Well, you'll never have me back after that. But anyway, so we have less trust in government, less trust in the courts, less trust in education, healthcare, just about every social institution. We have less trust, and we have less trust in one another. And the scary thing is that each generation, younger generation, is coming along less trusting. So when we are less trusting, but we are social creatures, we are then more prone to the fear. And we're more prone to what I call conflict entrepreneurs, okay, who feed on our fears of each other because we don't trust each other. Okay, now I can see some hands. Go for it. And she got hers up right away. Beat some of you guys out. Go for it.
And a lot of that led by the press.
A lot of that led by the press. So let's talk about the press. The press has a history in the past of being negative as well. Maybe some of you also were going to talk about how we have more kind of media outlets now, and we have more specialized media outlets where you can get your news, your facts, your information from the sources that already fit your bias. So we occupy different fact universes now. So if you ever, I do this once in a while, there'd be some big thing, and I look at New York Times headlines and the Wall Street Journal headlines. Like, was that the same thing? Or if you go to like CNN and Fox, is it the same? Are they talking about the same thing? Is there even a basis in fact? So we live in different fact universes. So another one, yes, sir.
From the Optimist creed, believing there's good in all people.
And so let's decline in that.
We don't believe that.
Well, that's the decline in the social trust. So, for example, the political science has been asking people in the polls every year, how much do you think other people can be relied upon to live up to their word? In 1970, 2/3 of people, 70% of people. Now it's down to like 25%. So we don't trust each other that much. And over here.
Less reliance on personal communication and more reliance on social media.
Yeah, social media. Social media is one that all the political scientists point to. It wasn't around 35 years ago. And what they call it an accelerant of conflict and polarization, an accelerant. To spread conspiracy theories and misinformation, you just have to click. In the old days, some of you remember, you had to like type things in a typewriter. That was for young people. There was this clickety-click. I'll tell you later. And then you did a mimeograph. Remember a mimeograph? Mimeograph. And then you had to white out your mistakes. And then you ran these suckers off. And then you had to put them in an envelope and address it to your fan club, and then put stamps in it and take it somewhere. That's how you spread conspiracy theories. Click. So social media is a huge one. It goes back to the negativity because all these algorithms know that the clicks and if they follow negativity. They follow negativity. Lots of studies on that. Go for it.
It's tied to social media, but it's external foreign countries, external agents influencing.
Yeah, that is pretty new, okay? It used to be they had to send spies here and learn the language and hang out. And now they can manipulate us through social media. So absolutely, yes.
There was a consultant named Frank Magid from Iowa City who changed the nature of television news. So in the late 70s, he began consulting with television news companies and changed to negative local news that emphasized a different way of storytelling, and that is now pervasive across American television news.
So television news, very, very interesting, that history. People feel the more local TV crime news, and that's often what it leads to, the less safe people feel, even in rural areas where the crime rate is very low.
Frank was the guy that invented it.
Well, so Frank, okay. I won't say anything. This is in the Optimist Creed. I'm not going to say anything bad about Frank. So in the back, we'll just do a couple more. Yeah.
I think gerrymandering has a lot to do with it.
Absolutely, absolutely. Gerrymandering means that for members of Congress, for members of the House, your district is like to be safe in terms of you don't have to deal with the other party. You don't have to be bipartisan. The threat to you being removed from office is within your own party, somebody more extreme in your own party. And so an example of that, we've done some workshops with some members of Congress. By the way, if you want to feel a little hope in Congress, Google the Problem Solvers Caucus, which is 30 Democrats, 30 Republicans who have lunch every week, and they try to work on some bipartisan solutions. They were, I'm told, largely responsible that the infrastructure bill got through. But so we did some workshops, and one of them said that if he were seen shaking, if somebody took a photograph of him shaking hands with somebody of the other party, and that got out on social media at home, he would be primaried. That's become a verb, because he's conforming with the enemy. This is his colleague. This is his colleague. And that's where we've gotten with the gerrymandering. So there's lots of others. I have to move on. Money in politics, specialized money, just lots of factors. There's probably 13 or 20 of them. And I'm glad that we're seeing these are happening to all of us, and the incentives are to divide. The incentives are to divide. And so what do we do about this? Well, one piece of good news is that more than 90% of Americans think we're too divided. 90% of Americans don't believe the earth is round. I mean, it's very rare that we have a consensus on that, okay? So we know we're divided. So as a couples therapist, the beginning is we have a problem, okay? That's the beginning, we have a problem. As opposed to the next step is it isn't just you, okay? So the idea that we have to solve this together, that it isn't just the other side, is a crucial aspect of this. So I had very little to do other than voting and supporting my favorite candidates until 2016. I wasn't involved in politics. And then after that election, which we all remember, it was like shocking to the winners and losers. It's very rare election that's equally shocking to everybody, okay? Two colleagues of mine, both named David Blankenhorn from New York City, Manhattan, Upper East Side, David Lapp from Southwest Ohio, were on the phone talking about how people were feeling about that election in Manhattan and Southwest Ohio. You can imagine they were feeling quite differently. It was gloom and doom, the world was ending in Manhattan, and it was morning in America. In Southwest Ohio, and they decided impulsively, just to spur the moment, to get 10 Hillary Clinton voters and 10 Donald Trump voters together for 13 hours over a weekend in Southwest Ohio in December. You're laughing. They called me, I laughed. And I said, well, what were you thinking of doing with them? And they said they didn't know, but they thought I could figure that part out. And I'm sitting here in Roseville and hoping, I'm still one of these people that carries the old paper calendar. I'll tell you later what those look like. It's sort of a book, and so I looked at my book hoping that I was not free the weekend of December 8th to the 10th, but I was. And I have to say, in seriousness, I felt like it was my patriotic duty to try to do something. And I had done a lot of work in communities and with people with differences for some time. So I had to do it, and consulted with everybody I knew. And it was interesting, in the elites in New York City were telling David Blankenhorn, do not do this. Everybody he consulted, do not do this. This will be a disaster. Well, it was not a disaster. They were people from South Lebanon, Ohio, in that county. And when we asked them why they came, it was Friday night, all day Saturday and Sunday morning. I asked them why they came. They were concerned for their country, their families, and their community. And the community part of it was, we have kids to raise here. We have roads to maintain. We have a hospital to maintain. And we've been fighting each other. We have to stop fighting each other in order to be able to run our community. And they were worried about their families, and they were worried about the country. They were politically divided. The Trump folks were very positive about Trump, and folks on the other side, where some of them were in tears, worried about their grandchildren and what was going to happen. So it wasn't that everybody was sort of kumbaya in the middle. And it was a very powerful experience. And I thought it would be a one-time thing. We just said, let's do it. And they didn't want to stop. Cashed in another frequent flyer ticket, went back there, and we had a reunion, and we decided we had to keep going. That there was something here that was important. Came back to Minnesota and realized that 13 hours over a weekend is too much to really do a lot of. So we called this a red-blue workshop. Designed a 7-hour version, a 3-hour version. Tried it out here in Minnesota. I have to tell you, the first few workshops, we actually made sure everybody was interviewed beforehand to make sure they would be responsible, okay? And so the first one here in Minnesota I did was at a Lutheran church in Dakota County that had pretty divided red-blue. The minister handpicked the people, okay? It was great. And then I thought, well, you can't take something to the whole nation if you have to vet everybody. So the big thing was at Dakota County Library. They just put it out, the announcement, come on to do this. And it worked beautifully. It worked beautifully. So what it told me was Americans with the right process, the right structure, could come together and communicate across the divide. I keep emphasizing the right structure because if you want to see the opposite, Google Oprah Winfrey 60 Minutes red, blue, or polarization or something like that, because she had an episode on 60 Minutes in which she had about 8 reds and 8 blues gathered around, just like the people that come to our workshops. And then the structure was things like, so what do you think about the Russian collusion thing? It was like tigers on this side, lions on that, red meat in the middle. So part of what I've learned is, if you just turn people loose, they will sound like, the worst angels of our nature will come out. We'll be interrupting each other, we'll be saying your facts are completely wrong, and we will just go at each other. If you create the right structure and process, then most people will rise to that. And I'll give you an example that relates to the value orientation. You know, I was looking at the Optimist Creed. A couple really stood out. To make all your friends feel that there is something in them. And let's take friends as neighbors, as community. Everybody we engage, there's something to them. And then to give so much time to the improvement of yourself that you have no time to criticize others. As we do in this red-blue workshop, it's called a fishbowl exercise, and some of you may not know that process. You take one group and they sit in a circle in the middle. The other group sits in a circle on the outside. Afterwards, they're going to switch. And if you're on the outside of the circle, your job is to listen to people in the inner circle and try to learn how they see themselves, and then to listen for anything you have in common. But you're not arguing with them. You know, when you're face-to-face with somebody, you kind of, you feel like you have to respond to somebody. No, you're just talking, like that table's talking, and just absorb it. Just sit back and listen. And then they flip. And the two questions for people in the circle are, Why are your side's values and policies good for the country? So what's the best of liberalism offering this country? What's the best of conservatism offering this country? You get that? And then the second one is, what are your reservations or concerns about your own side? And that's the sort of the self-criticism here. Because what are your reservations, concerns? And I can tell you how powerful it is, not only to hear people say, why the country will benefit from their political views, but to then be self-critical. Because you think, well, I would have said that about you, and you already know that. Isn't that interesting? And then what happens is afterwards, it's processed in pairs, red-blue pairs, and then in the whole group. And the process questions are, what did you learn about how people on the other side see themselves? What did you learn about how they see themselves? And did you see anything in common? And the facilitation is, you don't let people say anything else but those. Nothing else. Because once that happens, like, Dave would start, and I'd say, Dave, and he would say, well, I think what Terry said there was not, and then you stop him before he finishes his sentence. And so, Dave, the question on the floor is, what did you learn about how Terry sees himself, and did you say anything in common? So you have to hold people to the structure. And then what it brings out is a deeper understanding. And it brings out humility and self-criticism. We lack humility so much. When we fight it out, we don't deal with what our own side is. And there's another workshop that it's called a Common Ground workshop, single issue Common Ground, where we started this with, just a little topic of abortion. Why not start with an easy one? Okay? And what happens is we had 8 pro-life folks, strong pro-life, and 8 strong pro-choice folks, and lead them through a series of exercises where they hear the story behind somebody's conviction on the other side. I mean, if you're strongly convicted on one of those things, there's a story there. And so people hear the stories. And they hear what folks, their own version of their side. They also answer the question about any reservations or concerns about your own side. So you listen for complexity. And then the reds go to one group and the blues the other. And having listened to the other and shared, you come up with values, concerns, and policies that you believe, that you think the other side also believes and could accept. Do you get that? What values, concerns, and policy solutions that you believe, that you think, having listened to them, that they could accept. The goal is unanimous agreement. Okay, so both sides come together and they go through their list with some questions of clarification, and then there's a voting, and it has to be unanimous. That first group, came up with 20 common values, concerns, and policy solutions. 20, a whole bunch of policy solutions in there, like everybody agreed on better sex education in the schools. Everybody agreed on more access to contraception. Everybody agreed on more maternal infant care programs, the WIC program. Why would liberals and conservatives agree on a federal program? Well, think of it. If you're strongly pro-life, you want women to feel like they can feed their infant and thereby maybe decide to have that child. So they came up with all those. So what we decided after the last election and our country being so divided on elections, what we decided was to try to have a whole bunch of workshops on trustworthy elections. Okay, it's hugely dividing us. And so what we had was 25, 8 conservatives, 8 liberals, reds, blues, to come up with common values, concerns, and policy solutions. And that happened over a period of a year and a half. And then a group of 12 came together 2 weeks ago in Boston to coalesce and come to a consensus on 20 policy solutions. And I facilitated that. They brought me in to facilitate that. And we spent the day on it. And we have those. And those, it was going to be a document, there's going to be press stuff. It was people on the ground, deeply concerned, but concerned about different parts of this, and then agreeing on policy solutions that everybody could accept, but that neither side would have on their own put forward. Okay, because there's some stuff that I'm going to accept and put forward, even though I think your fears are exaggerated. Okay, but in order for us to work together and to have something, I have to attend to your fears. You have to attend to my concerns and fears, even though you think mine are exaggerated. You get that? And so that's the kind of a process of a role-taking, of understanding that nobody has the solutions and that we have to figure out a way to come together. So a couple of skills that I'll just talk about, and then I'll end with a few stories about some of our work with elected officials. If there's an attitude that I would recommend that we all cultivate about this political divide, is curiosity about how people in our lives come to their conclusions. Curiosity. Instead of, what? If there are people in your life who have passionate political beliefs, there's a story behind it. There are reasons for it. And to be able to answer the question, how could those people support that candidate? How could they hold that view? If you can't answer that question, I'm suggesting that you challenge yourself. That you challenge yourself to read people on the other political side who are thoughtful, read columnists, read books, people who are thoughtful, who are smart, and who hold very different political views. So such that, and we talk about this when in a workshop we do for elected officials on managing difficult conversations with colleagues, is to be able to achieve accurate disagreement. We don't have enough accurate disagreement. The disagreement is usually I'm arguing against my view of your view, not your actual view. So to develop a curiosity, to actually, if you really wanted to go for it, to intuitively get to, this is what's happened to me, to intuitively get to how language means such different things to different people. We talk about red language and blue language. Diversity, equity, inclusion. Are they red or blue? Those terms. Blue. They're blue, right? Self-reliance. Red. Patriotism. Red. Yeah. What the heck? Yeah. What the heck? Why did that happen? How did that happen? There's nothing inherently about those words. That's my point. There's nothing inherently about diversity, equity, inclusion, self-reliance, patriotism. They didn't used to be red or blue, but they are, and so they get caught up. And so as soon as somebody uses one of those terms, the other people click off. And what I'm encouraging you is not to click off and think, what does this mean to this person? And is there something in that I could claim as well? So it's that internal thing. The second thing would be, when you hear people in your own political circle do the bashing of the other side, see if you can pull back a little bit. Most hostile, negative, rancorous talk about politics occurs in like-minded groups. Because a lot of times we're afraid to say it to the other, right? And it is like we've learned, a lot of white folks have learned to speak up if there's something that sounds racist in a conversation, in a way that in the past maybe some of us would have said, that's old Uncle Joe. Well, Uncle Joe now, I'll be nice, but say, Uncle Joe, come on, dial that back, okay? I'm suggesting we need to do that in politics, is to suggest to our friends, dial it back a bit when we go into what I call the 4 horsemen of polarization, stereotyping, dismissing, ridiculing, and contempt for the 70+ million of our fellow citizens who were stupid enough to vote the other way. Okay? So the last thing is that I want to tell a couple of stories. I'm told, like, if I don't stop at 5 of, you're going to hang me. So, and he nodded, so I will be done. Close, he said. You didn't say no, he just said close. Okay, so one of the great things that's happened in recent years, and Dave and Mary Jo are partly responsible for that, is we've had elected officials approach us. So in Minnesota, really ahead of the game here, and doing workshops, managing difficult conversations with constituents, with colleagues, and we've been able to do with some members of legislatures and with some members of Congress a version of this red-blue workshop. And so I want to just tell a couple stories that help me continue to make the choice to be optimistic and hopeful. So this was the Connecticut State Legislature. When COVID was sort of winding down, but there was a lot of division. 8 Republicans, 8 Democrats, leaders, strongly divided, walked into the room. One side was all masked, and the other side had no masks on. Well, you know what side those were, because masks are red or blue, if you don't know. Okay, okay. So it was like, what's going on here? And it was this big, huge room, and they sat on different sides of it. I couldn't control that because it's this huge room and I couldn't control the room. They had to speak in microphones to introduce themselves. It was terrible. But then we got them into small groups, in smaller rooms, and we asked this question: what life experiences have influenced your values and beliefs about public policy and public service? What life experiences have influenced your values and beliefs about public policy and public service? Everybody had 5 uninterrupted minutes. Just like your thing you do around here, a minute and a half. It's a lovely exercise. And so this is 5 minutes to tell a story, to tell your stories. And it was powerful. It's what led them into public service. But I want to tell, at one point, a Democrat on my left said that he grew up in the foster care system. His father left the family. His mother suffered with paranoid schizophrenia. He and his siblings removed from the home, bounced around the foster care system, and he said this was a driving influence on him getting into government and public service to make a difference for these families. He no sooner finished than a Republican here said, oh my God, I don't believe this. I grew up in the foster care system. And he told his story about his life and how this drove him. They chose different approaches to working on the problem. One chose a somewhat more government program approach. The other worked with the faith communities, the voluntary sector. He later got into union work and job training. He was suspicious of government program. You see, the motivation, the passion was the same. Those 2 guys can't see each other the same way after that. And if we had started with, well, what kind of government program should we have for kids and families? Okay, but the root system was there. And then the final story is with some members of Congress, members of the Problem Solvers Caucus. And there was a Republican from a western state who introduced himself. He said, I'm as conservative as the day is long, but I'm a pragmatist, and now we have to work across the aisle. Okay, so they all answered the question, about 7 of them, 8 of them, about life experiences. There were stories of loss. Somebody had lost grandparents in the Holocaust, and other deaths in families, and stories of inspiration. There was not a dry eye in the room. People told their story. And the guy from the western state, his story was that his father left his family. He grew up in poverty with an outhouse. And when he was 9 or 10 years old, his mother, I always get emotional telling this, his mother took him to the state capitol and said, you could be here. You could be here. Okay? And he not only got there, he got all the way to Congress. So as we finished up, the question was, what are you taking with you from our conversation. And he said words I always like to repeat when I talk about this work. He said, what he took from this is, you can't fight somebody in the same way when you know their heart. You can't fight somebody in the same way when you know their heart. And so what we're gonna do the creed. This is about heart work. What you're doing is about heart work. And it's about, for me, it's about in difficult times, the choice to be optimistic, the choice to have hope, the choice to connect. So thank you so much for having me. Thank you. Thank you.
Stay up here a second.
Yeah. All right.